to order. Backbenchers. Okay, welcome back to the afternoon hunk of sessions. I'm really happy to get back underway. Quickly, I don't want to say very much. I'm going to introduce Nathaniel Stern, who will introduce Norm Wilson. But what I do want to do is to remind you, if you haven't, that we've got a number of interesting videos running on loop next door, including some of Norm's work and some others that have been submitted. So if you get a chance at breaks, or if you are all paneled out at a certain point, you can head over right through that door to 181. And also, I'm sure you've seen, but maybe not dwelled upon, we've got a couple of interesting interactive installations there, courtesy of Channel 2. So, okay, that's all I have to say. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
It's a pleasure for me to introduce Andrew Norman Wilson, a New York-based artist, a graduate from the Art Institute of Chicago and a former Google employee with a long, impressive, and varied list of exhibitions, fairs, residencies, and talks. For example, and this data was actually emailed to me this morning, which I think is doubly fitting, given some of the things we've been talking about at the conference. He will participate in Palazzo Peckham at the Venice Biennale in 2013, Art Basel 2013, and group shows at Beton Salon in Paris, Steve Turner Contemporary in Los Angeles, and Carol Fletcher in London. He recently had a solo show up at Three Walls in Chicago entitled The Refrain, Metfield Walpole, and is preparing solo exhibitions for Club Midnight in Berlin and important projects in Oakland, California. Dream Factory, his curatorial project with Aaron Nash, was recently presented at Import Projects in Berlin and Art Dubai, and recent press includes Aperture, Artform, Independent Curators International, and Tech Magazine. Wilson's work intervenes into the brands and infrastructures of Silicon Valley and other worldwide tech corporations to question the roles of labor, power, and capital. As I understand it, his Leaving the Information Powerhouse, known mostly for its search engine, was directly related to his work revealing some of its underbelly. Basically, Wilson made a video of some of the iniquities of Google's workers and their stations in life and was fired. The digital dark side, indeed. The import of Wilson's work, the stakes that he asks us to engage with are, I believe, paramount. What do we give of our lives for free to the Googles and the Facebooks and whoever else, which way they then go and sell, not to the highest bidder, but to anyone willing to pay for it? When we buy from Google, who are we underpaying for their labor, and what layer are we paying them for, if not to simply catalog data we've just given away to be sold? Wilson's work asks us to look at both what has changed and what has remained the same in the new digital economies, and how these economies have shifted our relationships to matter, commodification, information, profitability, and work. The questions he raises cut across the ontological, epistemological, ethical, and aesthetic issues that are only now coming to light. I'm sorry, I know that's just like a compulsory pun to say coming to light as part of the digital dark side. Conference in the new hierarchy of users. And users is a name not just because of how we use technology and have hierarchies from user to super user and above, but also for those of us addicted to our screens. As users, we provide greater service to our dealers than ourselves and play a large role in all kinds of systems of power and exploitation, whether we are aware of them or not. I'm really looking forward to this talk, which, as I understand it, is part performance, part presentation. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Andrew.
hired jointly by Transvideo Studios and Google, both headquartered in Mountain View, California. Transvideo had a contract with Google and took care of 100% of their video production in Mountain View, and sometimes elsewhere. My labor was sold to Google in the form of a 9-to-5 job. I had access to a personally unprecedented amount of privileges, but was not entitled to the ski trips, Disneyland adventures, stock options, and holiday cash bonuses from their team of temporary Santa Clauses. Thousands of people with red badges, such as me, my team, and most other contractors, worked amongst thousands of people with white badges as full-time Googlers. Interns are given green badges. However, a fourth class exists at Google that involves strictly data entry labor, or more appropriately, the labor of digitizing. These workers are identifiable by their yellow badges, and they go by the team name ScanOps. They scan books, page by page, for Google Book Search. The workers wearing yellow badges are not allowed any of the privileges that I was allowed. Ride the Google bikes, take the Google luxury limo shuttles home, eat free gourmet Google meals, attend authors at Google Talks, and receive free signed copies of the author's books, or set foot anywhere else on campus, except for the building they work in. They also are not given backpacks, mobile devices, thumb drives, or any chance for social interaction with any other Google employees. Most Google employees don't know about the Yellow Badge class. Their building, 3.1459, was next to mine, and I used to see them leave every day at precisely 2:15 p.m., like a bell just rang, telling the workers to leave the factory. Their shift starts at 4 a.m. I found the social arrangement interesting, and at a certain point, I decided to investigate the rationale behind Google's decision to exclude the Yellow Badge class from most privileges the company has to offer, despite the fact that their labor takes place in a Google building with a Google sign out front, and are being contracted to Google by another company just like my team, and just like other informational laborers, the kitchen staff, the shuttle drivers, custodians, and more. Eventually, I asked a superior on my team if I could borrow a camera to go out in the parking lot and videotape the yellow badged workers leaving the 3.1459 factory. That footage didn't turn out very well, so I did it again a week later. I decided if I were to represent these workers leaving the factory, it would be important to develop a relationship with the film subjects and welcome their perspective into the video. A week later, I approached a few of them to see if they would be willing to have a conversation in the near future about their jobs. The first girl mostly ignored me and started talking to someone on her cell phone. Two other young men said they'd be happy to talk about their work and accepted business cards with my email address. Another young man I approached was also willing to discuss his work. About the job, he briefly said that it's not what I want to be doing, but it pays the bills. Before I could give him my card, a very agitated, chubby white male with a red badge wedged himself between us and demanded that I show him my badge and tell him who my manager was. He told me the yellow-badged workers were extremely confidential people doing extremely confidential work, and I was standing in an extremely confidential area. He then reprimanded the yellow-badged worker for talking to me. I then found out the chubby white man knew what I was doing because the first girl I had spoken to followed the instructions in the back of her yellow badge, which is to call a certain manager if anyone asks about the work of the yellow badge class. The chubby white man brought me into the lobby of the 3.1459 building and told me to wait while he grabbed a security guard. A security guard with a red badge, and therefore more privileges than the yellow badge ScanOps employees working in the same building as him. He returned with a very sedate black guard and explained the situation. The guard wasn't aware of how confidential the work within the building actually was, but agreed to report this to his superiors in Google's campus meet space security. I walked 40 feet out of the extremely confidential area and into my building to continue working. The next morning, I received a call from one of my managers, who I'll refer to as Marco. Google security had told him about what had happened the day before and wanted to finalize the issue, which apparently means coming to a conclusion on the reason and outcome of the security breach so that the issue can be filtered and separated neatly into the bracketed accounts. I told Marco my reasons, which you'll hear in just a moment, and he passed along my statements to Google security. Shortly thereafter, Marco called me back and asked me if I'd get on a conference call with Ralph, the millionaire who owns Transvideo. I had met the man once and he didn't know who I was, so this conference call made me quite anxious. Ralph got on the phone and said, "So Marco tells me you're writing an expose piece on Google." He told me the issue was very serious because it could jeopardize Transvideo's contract with Google and potentially lead to 60 people losing their jobs. I explained my actual intents to Ralph, and Marco chimed in to say he never told Ralph it was to be an expose. Ralph asked me to issue a letter to Google Security explaining my intent. Here's that letter. To whom it may concern, yesterday I was outside the Google Book Search building, which is adjacent to the building I work in, and had the chance to talk to a few employees while they were leaving work. Most of them are people of color and are supposedly involved in the labor of digitizing information. I'm interested in issues of class, race, and labor, and so out of general curiosity, I wanted to ask these workers about their jobs. I'm aware of internal mechanisms for discussing labor issues with Google, and had no intention of defaming the company. I was not aware of how secretive the book search project is, but now understand how seriously my curiosity could jeopardize not only my own job and Transvideo's relationship with Google, but also my legal situation because of the non-disclosure agreement I signed. I apologize for bothering you with this innocent mistake, and can assure you that in the future I will be more cautious about respecting confidentiality at Google. Sincerely, Andrew Wilson. Immediately after I sent the letter to Ralph and Marco for review, Ralph wrote back to me. "Thanks, Andrew. I think this will help clear up any misunderstandings. Also, Marco said that you had mentioned that this was a personal project relating to the request you had made for an interview with one of the staff. Can you elaborate what this personal project is? Thanks again, Ralph." I responded, "Hello, Ralph. The personal project at this point is nothing beyond a general curiosity towards the ScanOps workers. I don't know enough about the situation to pursue any further understanding, and now that I know it's so super secret, I probably will never have the chance to. I think Google does a lot of great things socially and politically, but found it interesting that these workers perform labor similar to that of many red badge contractors, such as software engineers, custodians, security guards, etc., are mostly people of color and cannot eat Google meals, take the Google shuttle, ride a Google bike, or step foot anywhere else on campus. With backgrounds in sociology and political philosophy, I wasn't approaching this as an act of muckraking, but rather as an analysis of the transition from industrial labor to informational labor, and what this could mean in terms of race and class. Also, I saw this as a nice way to meet people who work right next to me." Yes. Andrew. More than an hour passed, so I figured Google Security was satisfied with my explanation and had finalized the issue. But Marco called back in a frenzy, saying that Google Security had proof of me outside, filming yellow-badged workers leaving the 3.1459 building on 2 separate occasions. I told him this was true, and he said that Google Legal was now involved, and they needed the videotapes immediately. I found one of the tapes in my bag and brought it to Marco, but confessed that I couldn't find the other tape. He relayed this information to Google Security and Google Legal, and they reiterated that they needed the tape immediately. The only place I could imagine it would be was back in my room in San Francisco, and Marco relayed the command of, "Go get it, right now," back to me. I borrowed a coworker's car and drove 40 minutes to San Francisco, searched my room for a half hour, and came up with nothing. On my way back, I called Marco to tell him I found nothing, and said I must have used the same tape for both shoots, and taped over the first day's footage with that of the second day. This isn't what happened, but I really could not and still cannot find the tape, and I knew Marco needed a conclusive answer for Google Security and Google Legal. He got back in touch with them and then called me back, telling me to return to the Transvideo office instead of my office at Google. When I arrived, Marco told me to wait in the Sunset conference room. This is the room where I signed on with the Transvideo team at Google and had my quarter-year reviews. Marco entered the room with Bert, the general manager of Transvideo who hired me and executed my reviews. Bert had a questionnaire to which my answers were. I was given permission to use the camera by Carl, a superior. The tape I used was mine. I do not have possession of the footage I shot anymore, and it does not exist in any other form. Bert then presented me with a document that would terminate my employment on the basis of me using Google's video equipment during working hours, although it was during my lunch break, without the approval of Transvideo's executive management. Marco then interjected into Bert's official explanation to say that Google was actually putting pressure on Transvideo to fire me because of my investigations of the 3.1459 building and the people who work there. Bert followed me back to Google and gave me a cardboard box to pack my non-Google issue belongings up. I told him I could take the shuttle home, as I've gotten on without my badge numerous times, but he insisted on driving me to the Caltrain station. On the drive over, I told him that losing my job right now isn't all that bad, as I was planning to quit in 2 months to prepare for grad school. He said that everything happens for a reason, and that he was glad I was being philosophical about it. I told him that's not really philosophy, and he didn't have much to say after that. I boarded the Caltrain with my cardboard box and made it home around 8 p.m.
In Haroon Farouki's film Workers Leaving the Factory, he discusses how in the Lumière Brothers film, also called Workers Leaving the Factory, the primary aim was to represent motion, in particular, to create an image of a workforce in motion, organized simultaneously by the work structure and temporal synchronization, the factory gates, a spatial grouping, and the filmmaker's choreography of the spatio-temporal relationship. Yet we have come to recognize that moving